So let's say welcome to Vanessa.
Thanks. So yes, I'm going to be talking today about my PhD research, which is about writing urban places using literary non-fiction. And so I've been researching and developing ways to do this that evoke the rich and complex experiences in a place, and considering ways to balance subjective experiences with the multiplicity of understandings and narratives. And so the particular aspect of my research I'm going to talk about is cartography, and creative and subversive cartography as a form of storytelling. But first I'm going to talk a little bit about text and the textual approaches to this complexity of stories, as it was this that led me to an expansion into cartography. So my, this is just a screenshot of it. My creative research project is this blog, Mirror Sydney, which I started in 2012. It's about unusual, forgotten, overlooked places in the city and suburbs. So it uses an approach which mixes literary non-fiction, psychogeography, urban walking, history, memoir and cartography. Often I write about places that people know predominantly through rumour and experience rather than official histories. And it's about particular types of places and their relationship to an evolving conception of the city as a whole. So this whole could be a project in itself, so the Sydney of Mirror Sydney, or it could be part of a reader's conception of Sydney, and also contribute to a broader sense of knowledge about the city. So just briefly, these are a few of the places that I have written about. So the top left is the Domain moving walkway, which is apparently the longest moving walkway in the world, which is goes from Hyde Park in the city to this parking station. It's quite a surreal place. On the right is the Marie Louise, which is an anachronistic store, which it closed down only recently, but it was kind of there in its beautiful 50s-ness for a long time after everything else changed around it. On the bottom left is the ghost platforms in the central station, which were built but never used. And then on the right is the Hornsby water sculpture, which is in that category of suburban folly. So I chose to write this project as a blog at a time when there was an upswell of interest in sharing personal stories of place online. So this was happening in place blogs, so blogs that were specifically about particular places or elements of places, and also Facebook groups such as Lost Sydney, and there's plenty of these kind of lost place groups. And these feature discussion based around images from archives, personal photos as well, and digitised photos and ephemera from various institutions. So these kind of groups collect individual stories of place, and particularly places and practices that have disappeared from the city. So the collection of these personal stories suggested to me a hybrid way of place writing that brought in these unofficial stories. So my background as a writer is in memoir and life stories, and I wanted to research potential forms that drew their strength from subjective experiences and personal knowledge of place in order to connect with a broader sense and understanding of it. So this inquiry became the focus of my project, to consider how the writer could use these elements as a way to write outwards from the self. And I wanted to particularly think about ways of writing about place that drew upon the storytelling methods and the types of stories told that have been enabled by social media. So this quote by Manovich I liked in its description of the effect of user-created media on information and narrative. And he writes, what was ephemeral, transient, unmappable and invisible became permanent, mappable and viewable. So this idea of a shift towards the mappable and the viewable, so an externalisation of what were previously private or subjective stories you probably wouldn't encounter in a public or semi-public, became a key concept for me in Mirror Sydney. So in tandem with the texts that I wrote for Mirror Sydney, which were published on the blog, I also developed a mapping practice which experimented with an alternative form of storytelling. The maps that I've created for Mirror Sydney are hand-drawn, and they exist as complementary representations to the written texts. This is one of them. So the two forms exist in dialogue. So there's an interrelationship between the maps and the texts, which aim to suggest the interrelationships that exist between the multiple narratives within place. So this is just one of them, murals and ghost signs, so two elements of the city of Sydney. So I choose to present hand-drawn maps as a kind of reflection of my focus on memoir and observation, and to foreground them as constructions that have been assembled by the writer. And so I've used typewriters and drawing and set and things like that to really kind of foreground that idea of assembling it and sort of as my own assemblage. So this actually was coupled with the text about the domain walkway, which I showed you the image of briefly earlier, which has so it has these murals all the way along it, and it's quite surreal because of these murals. So this is the map that goes with it, which takes one of the elements from that story, and how, you know, there are a lot of these murals that were hanging in the 1980s, and some have been restored and some are fading. So anyway, those two, the text and this map kind of go together. So there are two concepts that influence my decision to write about place in this way. And the first comes from, there's some pictures of the murals from the movie walkway. Okay, so these two concepts that influence my decision to write about place in this way. The first comes from the philosopher Edward Casey, and he writes about memory and place both working to congeal the disparate into a provisional unity. So I like this idea of provisional unity. And I feel like this is the kind of idea behind the maps I make. So it's understanding the city as a whole through a particular element, but it's always, of course, provisional and could be remapped in many different ways. And a similar idea to this provisional unity idea is one about place from the geographer Doreen Massey in the book Floor Space, and she refers to place as a temporary constellation. In this book, she seeks to reconceptualise ideas of space and the long river place. And her concept of place is one of thrown togetherness, so places exist as trajectories, and to conceive of place is to negotiate multiplicity. So with these kind of ideas in mind, I set about making these different maps for Sydney. Just to give a bit of background on creative and subversive mapping, and I guess mapping in general. So as spatial representations, maps have an intrinsic relationship with place, and they provide a form for directly linking topography with experience and knowledge, imagination and interpretation. Maps are a way of representing possibilities, connections and trajectories within and between places. This is another one of mine, so from Rose to Style. So at Sydney Harbour, through the perspective of the journey of this floating restaurant called Flanagan's Afloat. There it is in the 70s, and there it is in disgrace now, because it was in Rose Bay, it's a very posh area of Sydney, and it operated for decades, but then it fell into decline, and people hated it and really wanted it moved, and it ended up, it got towed across to this sort of ship purgatory area over in Balmain. There. So anyway, this is a map of the harbour, sort of from the perspective of that journey. So this is a time when the potential of maps and mappings has ever been greater. In the past decade, there has been a resurgence of interest in mapping across academic and popular culture, and there's many reasons for this. So in part, it comes out of critical cartography, which has arisen from the discipline of geography, where the authority of maps, so their power and their bias, has been brought under scrutiny. It's also a time when the digitisation of museum and library collections has brought about a renewed interest in the history of mapping, and there's plenty of blogs, like the one that you might have seen as Strange Maps, that collect these kind of maps. And also, of course, mapping technology continues to grow and diversify. So maps can encompass all sorts of approaches, and I think including those of literary non-fiction, which is where I work. The writer Robert McFarlane in The Wild Places refers to two broad categories for maps, the grid map and the story map. And he says the grid is the abstract geometry of the scientific map, which reduces the world only to data, and story maps refer to perceived places and journeys. But I would add that these often, they necessarily intersect, these two kinds of maps, grid and story. So here's just a few examples of other mapping projects that engage with the map this story. So one that was particularly influential to me was this book, Infinite City, the San Francisco Atlas by Rebecca Solnit. So it's a collaborative project which combines essays and creative and selective mappings of the San Francisco area. I'll just show you one of the maps. So it's got about, I think, 22 or something maps, and they're of different elements of the city. So this is the Mission District with kind of local allegiances mapped on there. So her atlas engages with some of these core ideas of writing a place, like Doreen Massey's concern with the place's multiplicity. Solnit writes that the atlas satures out of the infinite ether of potential versions, a few that will be made concrete and visible. And so yeah, this work collects these multiple maps of the same city with a different emphasis. So yeah, that's one form of that. And there are endless examples I could have chosen here, but I just thought I'd show three. So this one's by the artist Christian Knoll, and it's a community mapping project that uses biometric data. So these participants wear a device on their finger, which measures their skin response, so sort of excitation or anxiety level as they walk around. And to look, this map, it's got text on it, which is obviously unreadable here. But if you go to the website and have a look, you can zoom right in on it. It's quite interesting. So it maps these kind of the skin responses, which is the different colours here. And the text is from the participants' experience, so as they're walking around, they will keep a kind of diary in some way, and so it matches their actual experience with their physical experience. And another one that I thought was interesting was this one, which was a sensory map. So this artist, Kate McLean, she makes sensory maps. This is a smell map of Amsterdam. So it's kind of mapping this quite ephemeral thing and attempting to link this sort of, if something is ephemeral as the smell of the place. And again, she has some very interesting work that Vanessa for that. So that's pretty much all I've got to say. So I guess in terms of things to discuss, I guess this idea of mapping and creative cartography as a storytelling form and ways of adapting cartography to this idea of new factual storytelling, and the idea of maps as stories. So that's it. Thank you.